Owen Grant wasn't used to getting knocked on his back, but today, at 6 in the morning, it happened by a woman half his size wielding a kettlebell. "Whoa!" he barked, catching himself before hitting the floor. The woman's wide green eyes locked onto his. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry! I didn't see you!" Owen blinked, momentarily stunned, not from the near miss but from her. Sweat clung to her caramel-toned skin, her ponytail bouncing wildly as she dropped the kettlebell and rushed to him. She was gorgeous, in a real, gut-punching way that had nothing to do with makeup or designer clothes. "I'm fine," he said, standing upright. His voice came out rougher than he intended. He wasn't fine. His heart was hammering for a reason that had nothing to do with exercise. She laughed nervously, brushing hair from her face. "I'm Kelsey Carter. Official menace to gym-goers everywhere." "Owen," he said, offering his hand. Her grip was strong, confident. "You're sure you're not bleeding internally or something?" she teased, her smile lighting up the dim gym. He chuckled. "If I die, I'll make sure to haunt you." A flush crept up her neck. Fair enough. For a moment, neither of them moved, the morning bustle of the gym fading around them. Owen shook himself out of it first. "You're new here?" "Yeah. Just moved to the city last week. Figured I'd try working out before work. Clearly, I need supervision." "Maybe you just need a spotter," he said, surprising himself. Her laugh was soft and real. "You volunteering?" Owen's mouth pulled into a grin. "Couldn't let you take out any more innocent bystanders." She gave him a mock salute and picked up the kettlebell again, this time careful not to decapitate anyone. Owen found himself lingering longer than he should, watching her move, focused and determined. He had meetings downtown in an hour. Deals to close. Calls to make. Lives to change. Owen Grant was a millionaire before 30, made his fortune in real estate development, and was used to people bending over backward to get his attention. But Kelsey Carter didn't even know who he was. And for the first time in a long time, Owen wasn't in a rush to leave. The next morning, he showed up at the same gym, a little earlier than usual. He told himself it was a coincidence. Nothing to do with the woman who turned his world sideways with a kettlebell. She was there, headphones in, punching at a bag in the corner of the gym. Owen leaned on the wall, arms crossed, watching her. She was fierce. Unapologetic. The kind of woman who didn't need saving but made you want to stand beside her anyway. She noticed him and pulled her gloves off, jogging over. "Well, look who survived," she said, tossing her towel over her shoulder. "Barely," he said, grinning. "You here every morning?" "Trying to be. Work's been crazy, though." "What do you do?" "Marketing assistant," she said, wrinkling her nose. "Nothing glamorous. Just started at a tech company downtown." He raised a brow. "Tech? That's a rough world." She nodded, grabbing her water bottle. "Yeah, but it's a foot in the door. I'm hoping to move up someday." Owen liked that. She wasn't sitting around waiting for things to happen, she was chasing them down. "You?" she asked, sipping her water. "What do you do?" Owen hesitated. Most of the time, he led with the big titles, the impressive numbers. But with Kelsey, it felt wrong. He shrugged. "I'm in real estate." She smiled. "Nice. You sell homes?" "Something like that," he said, deciding he'd explain more later. Maybe after she liked him for who he was, not what he had. "Well, if I ever make enough to buy a place, you're my guy," she said with a wink. Owen laughed. "Deal." Over the next week, it became a routine. Early mornings turned into coffee runs after workouts. Coffee runs turned into walks around the block, laughing about everything and nothing. He learned Kelsey loved thunderstorms but hated umbrellas, preferred dogs over cats, and had a weakness for bad action movies. She learned Owen hated ties, secretly loved baking, and couldn't dance to save his life. One morning, as they sat on the curb sipping coffee, she turned to him out of nowhere. "You ever feel like you're stuck?" she asked, staring at the sunrise. Owen looked at her, really looked at her. Yeah. More than I should. She nodded like she understood. It's like you work hard, you do everything you're supposed to, but you're still waiting for something to feel real. He didn't know what made him do it, maybe the way the early light caught her hair, maybe the sadness behind her smile, but he reached out and tucked a loose strand behind her ear. It'll feel real, he said quietly. You just have to find the right thing. Their eyes locked, and for a second, the world tilted again. Kelsey pulled back, flustered. I should get to work. Yeah, Owen said, clearing his throat. Me too. As they stood, he caught her hand in his for a moment longer than necessary. See you tomorrow? He asked. A smile tugged at her lips. Wouldn't miss it. The next morning, Owen wasn't at the gym. Neither was the next day. Kelsey told herself it was silly to miss him. They barely knew each other. But the empty space where he used to be gnawed at her. On the third day, she walked into the gym lobby and almost collided with a huge display of red roses. The receptionist looked up. Are you Kelsey Carter? She blinked. Yeah? The woman grinned and handed her a small white envelope. Inside, in messy handwriting, were 4 words. Sorry. Dinner tonight? Oh, Kelsey laughed, pressing the card to her chest. People stared, but she didn't care. She whipped out her phone and called the number scrawled beneath the message. Hello? Owen's voice was warm, familiar. She grinned. I hope you're not planning to hit me with a kettlebell this time. He laughed. Only if you say no. Where? She asked. Meet me outside the gym at 7. At exactly 7, a sleek black Aston Martin pulled up to the curb where Kelsey stood. Her jaw dropped. The window rolled down, and Owen leaned over, wearing a navy blazer that fit too well to be off the rack. You coming? He asked, grinning. Kelsey climbed in, stunned. The interior smelled like leather, and something that was just Owen. Nice car, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. It's okay, he said casually, pulling into traffic. Okay? This thing probably costs more than my college tuition. He chuckled. Maybe. Kelsey stared at him, suspicion dawning. You're not just some real estate agent, are you? Owen glanced at her, his mouth twitching. Not exactly. How not exactly? I own a few companies, he said. Developments. Hotels. Some other stuff. Kelsey gaped at him. You're rich? He shrugged. Millionaire. Technically. She sat back, stunned. You could have led with that. Would you have talked to me if I did? Kelsey thought about it. She hated how money changed people. How they acted like it made them better than you. No, she admitted. Owen smiled. That's what I thought. She narrowed her eyes at him. You tricked me. I preferred to call it leveling the playing field. She crossed her arms, pretending to be mad. But inside, her heart was racing. Because rich or not, Owen Grant was the realest thing she'd felt in a long time. And something told her this was only the beginning. Owen guided the car smoothly through the glittering city streets, the low hum of the engine wrapping around them like a secret. Kelsey watched him in the dim light, studying the way his jaw tightened when he focused, the way his fingers curled confidently around the steering wheel. Where are we going? She asked, her voice breaking the comfortable silence. He glanced at her, a glint of mischief in his eyes. Somewhere that has decent food. And no kettlebells. She laughed, the tension that had built up earlier slipping away. I'm going to hold you to that. Minutes later, they pulled up to an understated building tucked between towering glass monoliths. No flashy signs, no velvet ropes, just a simple brass plaque by the door that read Vincent's. A valet opened her door before she could even reach for the handle, and Owen tossed the keys with a casualness that suggested he'd done it 1,000 times. Inside, the restaurant was a different world altogether. Candlelight flickered across crisp white tablecloths, and a grand piano in the corner filled the space with soft, lilting music. Waiters glided between tables, balancing silver trays with an ease that spoke of years of practice. Kelsey's sandals clicked softly against the marble floor as Owen led her to a secluded table by a window overlooking the city. She sank into the plush chair, feeling out of place among the tailored suits and glittering jewelry. But when she looked across at Owen, who was simply watching her with quiet amusement, some of that discomfort melted away. "You do realize this is the fanciest dinner I've ever had," she said, unfolding her napkin and placing it carefully on her lap. "Good," Owen said, signaling the waiter with a subtle nod. "I figured you deserved something more memorable than a paper cup of burnt coffee." A bottle of wine materialized at their table almost instantly. Owen said something in French to the sommelier, who nodded and poured them each a glass. Kelsey stared at the deep red liquid swirling in her glass, feeling like she had stumbled into someone else's life. "So," she said, lifting her eyes to his, "do you always sweep women off their feet with fast cars and candlelight?" Owen tilted his head, considering. "No. Usually I'm too busy trying to dodge board meetings and pretending to enjoy charity galas. And yet here you are," she teased, taking a sip of the wine and trying not to gasp at how good it was. "Here I am," he agreed. Their appetizers arrived, delicate plates that looked more like artwork than food. Kelsey hesitated, unsure how to even begin eating something that had gold flakes sprinkled on top. "You're supposed to enjoy it, not frame it," Owen said, his voice low and warm. She laughed, picking up her fork. "I'll try to remember that." As they ate, the conversation shifted, deepening in a way Kelsey hadn't expected. She learned Owen had grown up in Chicago, the son of a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. He wasn't some silver spoon heir. He had built his empire from the ground up, brick by painstaking brick. "You don't act like someone with a private jet," she said, twirling her fork between her fingers. "Would it be better if I did?" he asked, arching an eyebrow. She shrugged. "Depends. Do you have a secret lair and a butler named Alfred?" His laugh rumbled across the table, rich and genuine. "No lair. No butler. Just a lot of late nights and too much black coffee." Their entrees arrived, perfectly seared steaks with sides that looked almost too beautiful to eat. Kelsey dug in, grateful that Owen didn't bat an eye when she cleaned her plate with alarming efficiency. "Don't judge me," she said, dabbing at her mouth with her napkin. "I skipped lunch." "I'm just impressed," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Most people pick at the food here, like eating it might ruin their image." "Guess I'm not most people," she said, meeting his gaze head on. "No," he said quietly. "You're not." The air between them shifted, charged with something electric. Kelsey found herself unable to look away, her pulse thrumming in her ears. After dessert, a molten chocolate cake that Owen insisted she have the first bite of, he stood and offered his hand. "Come on," he said, his voice low. She placed her hand in his without hesitation. Outside, the city buzzed around them, but Owen led her down a quiet side street, away from the noise and lights. Strings of fairy lights crisscrossed overhead, casting a soft glow over the cobblestones. Kelsey glanced around, bemused. "Where are we going now? Secret garden? Hidden speakeasy?" "You'll see," he said, squeezing her hand. They stopped in front of a wrought iron gate. Beyond it, a rooftop terrace spilled out, empty except for a single table and 2 chairs under the stars. "How did you?" she began. "I know the owner," Owen said simply. "Figured we could use a little more time." She stepped onto the terrace, the city skyline stretching out endlessly around them. It was breathtaking, and for a moment, all she could do was stand there, soaking it in. "This is incredible," she whispered. Owen moved behind her close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. "You deserve incredible," he said, his breath warm against her ear. She turned to face him, her heart hammering. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Owen leaned in, slow and deliberate, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met, and the world fell away. The kiss was not tentative, it was full of all the things they hadn't said, all the sparks that had been building between them from the moment she nearly knocked him down with the kettlebell. His hand slid to the small of her back, anchoring her to him, while her fingers curled into the fabric of his blazer, desperate to hold on. When they finally broke apart, Kelsey was breathing hard, her cheeks flushed. "Wow," she said, her voice shaky. Owen rested his forehead against hers, his smile something softer than she had seen before. "Yeah. Wow." They stood there for a while longer, wrapped up in each other, the city lights dancing around them. And for the first time in a long time, Kelsey felt like she wasn't stuck anymore. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The next morning, the gym felt strangely different. Not because of the clanking weights or the grunts of early risers, but because Owen wasn't hidden in the background anymore. He was leaning against the reception desk, arms folded, watching Kelsey walk through the door like she was the only thing worth looking at. She caught his gaze and lifted an eyebrow, tossing her duffel bag onto a bench. "You stalking me now?" Owen pushed off the desk and walked toward her, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. "If I were stalking you, I'd be doing a much worse job." "You're early," she said, pulling her hair into a messy bun. "Figured you'd be sleeping off all that fancy wine and rooftop stargazing. I figured you might need a partner for whatever chaos you're about to unleash in here. I was planning on boxing today. You sure you're ready for that? Only one way to find out." She tossed him a pair of gloves without warning. He caught them easily, laughter in his eyes. They moved to the back where the heavy bags hung silent and waiting. As they wrapped their hands, Kelsey glanced sideways at him. "So," she said, tightening the tape around her knuckles, "this is your idea of a second date?" Owen slipped one of the gloves on and flexed his fingers. "Second dates should be memorable. Besides, you already know I'm terrible at dancing. Might as well impress you with my left hook." She grinned, pulling on her gloves. "You assume you'll survive." They squared off at adjacent bags, falling into an easy rhythm. Kelsey's punches were sharp, economical. Owen's were heavier, more controlled. The sound of leather hitting leather filled the space between them, but it wasn't long before Kelsey dropped her arms and shook her head with an exaggerated sigh. "You're holding back," she said, pointing her glove at him. "I'm trying not to embarrass myself." She laughed, the sound carrying over the thuds of other workouts. "Embarrass yourself. I dare you." He gave her a look that promised trouble and launched into a flurry of punches that made the bag sway violently. Kelsey whistled low. "Okay, not bad," she admitted. "Not bad?" Owen pulled off his gloves, his breathing steady. "I need a better rating than that." She leaned against the bag, studying him. "Fine. You're officially upgraded to moderately impressive. I'll take it." They both peeled off their wraps, and something about the easy way they moved around each other felt dangerously close to natural. Kelsey tucked her gloves under her arm and glanced at him. "You know," she said, "I still don't really get you." He raised an eyebrow. "What's to get?" "You're like a puzzle someone scattered all over the floor. One minute you're mysterious real estate mogul. The next, your rooftop dinners and boxing gloves. Maybe I'm just bad at sticking to a script." She considered that, biting the inside of her cheek. "Or maybe you don't want me to figure you out." He stepped closer, the air tightening between them. "Maybe I want you to try." The heat in his gaze made her heart stutter. She swallowed hard and looked away, pretending to fuss with her duffel bag. "You're dangerous, Owen Grant," she said lightly. He leaned in, his voice a low rumble. "You have no idea." They left the gym together, the morning sun slanting across the street. Owen's car, sleek and impossible to ignore, was parked half a block away. He opened the passenger door for her without a word, and she slid inside, pretending her stomach hadn't just flipped over itself. As he pulled into traffic, Kelsey glanced at him. "So what's next? Another rooftop? A secret yacht?" "No yachts," he said, steering with one hand. I thought maybe something simpler. She raised an eyebrow. Like what? He turned onto a quieter street lined with trees already bursting into early summer bloom. The car slowed in front of a cozy cafe with ivy crawling up its brick facade. He parked and looked at her. Breakfast, he said simply. She blinked. You? At a normal cafe? I'm full of surprises. Inside, the cafe was warm and bustling, the air rich with the smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon. They squeezed into a corner booth, the table wobbly but charming. A harried waitress dropped menus in front of them with a distracted smile. Kelsey scanned the menu. I'm getting pancakes. Obviously, Owen said. You're still recovering from last night's chocolate cake. She kicked him lightly under the table. Don't judge my priorities. He grinned and ordered for both of them without hesitation, adding an extra side of bacon when the waitress raised an eyebrow. When the food arrived, Kelsey leaned over her plate, inhaling the sugary scent. She stabbed a forkful of pancake and pointed it at him. Okay, serious question. Why me? He set his coffee down, meeting her gaze without flinching. Because you don't care about the things everyone else does. You look at me and see me. Not the bank accounts or the buildings with my name on them. She chewed slowly, considering that. You're a lot to take in. So are you, he said, his voice rougher now. But I think that's the point. For a while, they ate in companionable silence, the clatter of dishes and low hum of conversation filling the space around them. Kelsey wiped her mouth with a napkin and leaned back. You know, most guys would have tried to impress me with something flashy. Private jets. Designer shopping sprees. Owen shrugged. Flashy's easy. I'm not looking for easy. Her stomach flipped again, and she hated how much she liked hearing that. They left the cafe hand in hand, the morning sun casting long shadows on the sidewalk. Owen paused by the passenger door, his fingers still intertwined with hers. I know we're moving fast, he said, his thumb brushing her knuckles. But I'm not interested in pretending this is something casual. She looked up at him, heart beating wildly against her ribs. Neither am I. He bent his head, pressing a kiss to her forehead, the gesture so tender it nearly undid her. When they drove off, Kelsey stared out the window, her mind racing faster than the car. She wasn't naive. She knew fairy tales didn't usually start with millionaires and gym accidents. But maybe, just maybe, hers was about to. And this time, she wasn't going to run from it. The following week unfolded like a dream that Kelsey barely dared to believe was real. Owen didn't just fit into her life, he expanded it, pulling her into a world she had only glimpsed from the outside without ever feeling like an outsider. On Friday evening, he picked her up outside her office building in a vintage black Rolls-Royce, the kind of car that turned heads and whispered old-world charm. He stepped out in a tailored charcoal suit, a sharp contrast to the sea of rushed commuters around them. When he extended his hand, she took it without hesitation. You're going to make me late for my billion-dollar meeting, she teased, squeezing his fingers. Then it's already worth it, he said, opening the door for her. Instead of whisking her off to another glittering restaurant or rooftop terrace, Owen drove them to the outskirts of the city, where the skyline melted into sprawling estates and winding driveways. They pulled up to a wrought iron gate that swung open at their approach, revealing a property that looked like it belonged in a glossy magazine. Kelsey sat forward, wide-eyed. You live here? He shook his head, pulling into a circular driveway. No. I bought it last year. I've been restoring it slowly. It's the first project I did just for myself. As they stepped out of the car, the scent of blooming lilacs filled the air. The house itself was a masterpiece of stone and timber, with tall windows that caught the last light of the day. Owen led her through the front doors into a grand foyer where polished hardwood stretched out beneath an enormous crystal chandelier. You did all this? She asked, trailing her fingers along the carved banister of the staircase. With a lot of help, he admitted, watching her reaction carefully. But every decision, every detail, that was me. Kelsey wandered through the rooms, marveling at the warmth and character woven into every corner. It wasn't cold or sterile like she had imagined a millionaire's estate might be. It felt lived in, loved. They ended up outside on a stone patio overlooking a still pond. Lanterns hung from the trees, casting a soft, golden glow as dusk settled. A small table was set with delicate china and a spread of food that made Kelsey's stomach rumble. "You planned all this?" she asked, turning to him. Owen shrugged one shoulder. "I figured we deserved a night with no distractions." As they sat down, Kelsey picked up a piece of bread, tearing it thoughtfully. "You know," she said, her voice softer now, "I keep waiting for the moment when this stops feeling real." "It's real," Owen said firmly, reaching across the table to trace his thumb across her knuckles. "But how can you be sure?" she asked, her chest tightening. "You're. You. And I'm just." "You're not just anything," he interrupted, his voice low. "You're everything." Her throat tightened painfully, but she managed a shaky laugh. "You know, if you keep saying things like that, I'm going to start believing you." "Good," he said. "Because I'm not planning on going anywhere." They ate slowly, talking about everything from travel dreams to the books they'd loved as kids. Owen confessed he had always wanted to learn how to sail, but had never found the time. Kelsey admitted she had once planned to backpack through Europe but had gotten sidelined by student loans. "You still could," he said, watching her closely. "If you wanted to." She raised an eyebrow. "And what, leave behind this mysterious millionaire who feeds me fancy cheese and kisses me like he's afraid the world might end?" He leaned back in his chair, laughter rumbling from deep in his chest. "When you put it like that, it'd be a mistake to leave." The night deepened around them, the stars emerging one by one. After clearing the dishes away, Owen returned with a small velvet box, holding it behind his back as he approached. Kelsey froze, her heart slamming against her ribs. "Owen, it's not what you think," he said quickly, his lips twitching. "Open it." She took the box with trembling fingers and flipped it open. Nestled inside was a delicate silver bracelet, simple and elegant, with a tiny charm shaped like a kettlebell. She laughed, the sound bubbling up uncontrollably. "You're impossible." "You almost killed me with one," he said, his eyes dancing. "Figured it deserved a tribute." She slipped the bracelet onto her wrist, the charm catching the lantern light. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick. Owen cupped her face in his hands, tilting her chin up. "Kelsey, I'm not interested in half measures. I'm all in." She leaned into his touch, every wall she had carefully built crumbling to dust. "So am I," she whispered. The kiss they shared then was different from before, slower, deeper, a promise sealed under the stars. Later, as they sat curled together by the pond, Kelsey rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I was scared," she admitted quietly. "Before you. I thought if I let anyone in, they'd see all the cracks and walk away." "I see them," Owen said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "And I'm still here." She closed her eyes, feeling the truth of his words wrap around her like a shield. "You changed everything," she said. "So did you," Owen murmured. In the days that followed, their lives wove together inextricably. Owen introduced her to the parts of his world he had kept hidden from everyone else, the charity projects he funded anonymously, the battered journal he kept filled with sketches of buildings he dreamed of restoring, the late-night drives when he just needed to see the city lights. Kelsey, in turn, showed him the simple joys he had forgotten: lazy Sundays spent reading at the park, spontaneous picnics with dollar store sandwiches, laughter that bubbled up without warning. One evening, as they sat on the rooftop of her tiny apartment building, watching the city hum below, Owen turned to her. "Move in with me," he said, his voice steady. She blinked, startled. "Are you serious?" "I don't want to waste another minute," he said, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. "I want you with me. Every day." Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away, smiling so hard it hurt. "Yes," He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground in a dizzying spin that made her laugh and cry all at once. And in that moment, Kelsey knew this wasn't a fairy tale. It was something better. It was real. It was theirs. And it was only just beginning. The move happened quicker than either of them expected. Owen arranged everything like it was the most natural decision in the world. He refused to let Kelsey lift a box larger than a shoe, instead hiring a team who packed her modest apartment in a matter of hours, treating her few belongings with surprising respect. As she stood in the doorway of the empty space that had been her home, memories flickering in and out like fading photographs, Owen came up behind her. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low. She nodded, resting her hand over his where it wrapped around her waist. "It's just strange. I lived here longer than anywhere else." "You're not losing anything," he said. "You're just making room for more." They drove back to Owen's estate with the last of her things, a battered mug she refused to part with, a worn copy of her favorite novel, and a tiny potted plant that had somehow survived 3 moves and countless forgotten waterings. He insisted on carrying the plant himself, nestling it in a sun-drenched corner of the living room where he said it would thrive. In the days that followed, the estate transformed. It wasn't just polished hardwood and curated art anymore. It was Kelsey's laughter echoing through the halls, her books stacked precariously on side tables, her favorite blanket draped over the back of a leather armchair. She filled the vastness with life. One evening, as the sun dipped low and bathed the house in gold, Owen found her in the kitchen arguing with a stubborn stand mixer. "You're fighting a losing battle," he said, leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. Kelsey scowled at the machine. "I promised my boss I'd bake something for the charity auction tomorrow. Thought I'd try homemade cupcakes." "You're ambitious," he teased. "Need backup?" She wiped flour from her cheek with the back of her hand. "Only if your kitchen skills are better than your dancing." He laughed, stepping in to grab a bowl. "I'll take that risk." They worked side by side, Owen reading the instructions aloud in an exaggeratedly serious tone while Kelsey measured and mixed. By the time the cupcakes were in the oven, the kitchen looked like a flour bomb had exploded. Kelsey leaned against the counter, laughing breathlessly. "We are never getting our security deposit back." Owen tossed a towel at her. "Good thing we own the place." She caught it easily, her smile softening. "I'm still getting used to that." "You'll get there," he said, his gaze holding hers. "You belong here." The next evening, Owen accompanied her to the charity auction, held in a grand ballroom downtown. Kelsey wore a deep emerald dress that clung to her curves, while Owen looked painfully handsome in a dark suit with no tie, his shirt unbuttoned just enough to hint at the relaxed confidence beneath the polished exterior. As they entered the ballroom, heads turned, whispers trailing behind them. Kelsey stiffened, but Owen squeezed her hand. "Ignore them," he said under his breath. "They don't matter." She nodded, lifting her chin. She wasn't the same girl who had tripped over kettlebells and doubted her worth. She was someone Owen had chosen, someone who had built a life with him, brick by uneven brick. The cupcakes sold for an absurd amount, a bidding war breaking out between 2 tech CEOs that left Kelsey wide-eyed and Owen trying not to laugh behind his champagne glass. Later, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the city glittering beneath them, Owen slipped his arm around her waist. "You handled that like a pro," he said. "I was terrified," she admitted, leaning into him. "You couldn't tell." She turned her head to meet his eyes, the cool night air brushing over her skin. "What if I never feel like I fully fit into this world?" He brushed his thumb across her cheek. "You're not supposed to fit into it. We're supposed to make our own world." Her heart ached at the raw truth in his voice. "You really believe that?" "I believe in you," he said simply. Kelsey kissed him then, slow and sure, the city stretching out endlessly behind them. By the time fall rolled in, their lives had settled into a rhythm. Mornings filled with shared coffee and rushed goodbyes, evenings spent cooking questionable dinners and dancing barefoot in the living room. Owen surprised her one crisp Saturday afternoon when he drove them out to a sun-drenched vineyard an hour outside the city. They wandered between rows of golden vines, a light breeze tugging at Kelsey's hair. At the top of a small hill, a white gazebo overlooked the sprawling fields. Owen paused there, pulling her to a stop. "I had plans," he said, pulling something from his pocket. "Big ones. Fancy ones. But this feels right." He dropped to one knee, the late afternoon sun catching the simple diamond ring in his hand. "Kelsey Carter, you turned my life upside down. You made it better than I thought it could be. I don't want another day without you by my side. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred her vision, but her voice was clear. "Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, standing to lift her into his arms as she laughed and cried and clung to him all at once. They married the following spring, in the backyard of the estate Owen had once restored for himself but now shared fully with her. It was a small ceremony, just family and close friends, the air thick with the scent of lilacs and fresh earth. Kelsey wore a simple lace gown and walked barefoot across the grass to where Owen waited, his eyes never leaving hers. They exchanged vows under the same trees that had once sheltered their first promises, the delicate charm of the kettlebell bracelet glittering on her wrist as she slid the ring onto his hand. When Owen kissed her, sealing their promises, it felt inevitable, like a tide finally coming home. Years later, on another golden evening, Kelsey sat on the patio, a glass of wine in her hand, watching Owen chase a giggling toddler across the lawn. Their daughter, with her father's dark hair and her mother's stubborn chin, shrieked with delight as Owen scooped her up and spun her around. Kelsey smiled, touching the small bump just beginning to show beneath her sundress. Another little Grant would be arriving soon, and somehow, their hearts would stretch to make room. Owen caught her gaze and grinned, crossing the grass to press a kiss to her forehead, their daughter squirming between them. "You're my everything," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "And you're mine," she whispered back. The sun dipped behind the trees, casting a warm glow over the estate that had once been just stone and timber but was now something infinitely more. It was home. It was forever.